Hi everybody, it's great to be back here again. Itamar, it's Friday. Parashat Kidoshim, yesterday was Holocaust Memorial Day. Next week, Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel Independence Day. We just finished Passover. And this week's portion opens up, God tells Moshe, Kidoshim to you, Israel must be holy. Be holy, because I am holy. What does it mean to be holy? How do we understand? How can we possibly... It's easy to say, but so hard to accomplish, to be holy. I mean, the whole Torah is all about being holy, right? What is this emphasis in this week's portion about being holy? And I think it connects to all the events that are surrounding us. And again, the terrible tragedy last week where Rabbi Goldstein in the synagogue, which was attacked, and one of the members of his community was brutally murdered. He lost his fingers. He spoke in the White House so beautifully. Understanding these kind of anti-Semitism is part of the picture of understanding what holiness is all about as well. And the Holocaust, of course, where 6 million Jews were murdered. And what did Nazis want to do? Why did they want to wipe out the nation of Israel? That's part of understanding what holiness is all about. Before we actually get to the answer, I want to bring a few sources down. And one of them, Rav Kook wrote a book called Eder Yakar. Eder comes from the Aderet, the name of his father-in-law, Eliyahu David Rabinovich To'omim, who passed away in his early 60s, and he was a giant of Torah, great scholar, great rabbi, great saint. Rav Kook wrote some essays in his memory. And in one of his essays, the first chapter of Me'at Sori, Rav Kook writes something very powerful, which I'd like to read a few of his lines here. And he says, Be'et hitmotetut haruach, when spirituality will collapse. Yishpal ish, humanity will go totally down. So Rav Kook is of course saying that spirituality and the level of humanity are connected, obviously. שאלת החיים תהפך כולה רק לשאלה מכנית שפלה. Saying the question of life will just be a mechanical question, a low question of life. כלומר, איך משיגים עצים להסיק את התנור הקטן? How do we get wood to light our small oven? לחמם על ידו את בית החומר אדם, to warm up a person's materialistic home, man's home. In other words, Rav Kook is saying that life could be summarized as the small needs, the necessities, which we call economical and security of a person. And nothing more than that, economical and security comforts. To achieve that, it costs a lot of money. That's a person's bread, to light that stove. A person has to work very hard to achieve that, right? To get materialistic and secure, to feel secure, stability, that requires work. As we know, it says in Genesis, with the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread. Omnam, Rav Kook goes on to say, but this house has windows to it. Through those windows, rays of light enter the windows. A person is not able to survive on materialistic ways alone, because he has a divine soul which is beating within inside of him, which is always pushing him towards things which are much greater, much higher than the physical world, right? Than the bread of the world we're talking about. And Rav Kook says, these light rays that are coming through his materialistic home, and he feels secure, his safe zone. But he's being reminded by the light rays that are entering his home, the spiritual rays, that there's something more than just a materialistic way of living in the world. And it disturbs him from enjoying his life the way he wants to enjoy his life. על כן צריכו גם כן לאמצעים הסותמים את החלונות הללו. Rav Kook says, therefore, a person is looking to ways to close off the windows. Right? He wants to just block out that light. He doesn't want to be bothered with spiritual things. How can I push out the light of the soul? שעל פי הכרח זה נוצרו כל החוכמות היפות למתת הזמן. And Rav Kook says, all the wonderful wisdom in the world that were created to destroy, to murder time, basically. That's what they're for. One of the greatest ones is the television, as we all know. It is man's greatest weakness. To sit in front of the TV screen, wonderful entertainment, all kinds of things out there. But how much precious hours of our time are we going to burn in front of the tube? And that's one, of course, one example. Today, we're surrounded by so many other things that distract us, that take us away from our most important, vital part of our life, to let the light rays in to our lives and enlighten our spiritual being. Rav Kook goes on to say, כשהסגנון הזה עולה מכל ההוראה, when this materialistic style rises, של החיים האהובים. In other words, when the entire life is focused only on materialism. אין אנו יכולים לשער עד כמה רוח הכלל עלול הוא להיות שוקע ויורד. We cannot fathom, Rav Kook says, how much a person can go down. Constantly dropping down when the world is totally based on materialism. והשקיעה היא עמוקה עד אין חקר. It is, you can't imagine, it just falls in this abyss that has no end, endless abyss of materialism. מתחלת מעוממות זו המוסר נשגב. How does it begin? Rav Kook says, מעוממות זו המוסר. First, what is the first thing to go? ויורדת עד שכחת הצורה האנושית. First we see that ethics begins to weaken. And slowly but surely, the basic levels of ethics have become weaker and weaker until man loses his enoshut, loses his humanity almost. If we are totally encompassed in a materialistic way of life, eventually we won't be left with humanity. Machalat yirida zot, this disease, Rav Kook calls it a disease, when it hits Israel, now he's focused particularly on the people of Israel. היא מכשלת את כוחו, 2,000 מונים יותר מכל שהיא מכשלת כוחם של כל עם בלשון. Rav Kook says, when this thing hits the people of Israel, this disease of materialism, the effect, the detrimental effect is going to be 1,000 times more on the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel, as opposed to the nation, it's the nation, of course, it's going to bring everyone down. But Israel, it's going to have a much greater effect on bringing Israel much down, much further down. Rav Kook goes on to say, Am zeh, the nation of Israel, shu bikaro mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh, which is supposed to be a nation of priests and a holy nation. שכל חייו הכלליים הם השאיפה גדולה, אדירה וארוכה. Its entire life. It's supposed to be a calling, a desire. לרוממות רוח נשגב ונעלה. For the upliftment, right, of our soul we're talking about. Rav Kook is saying the life of Israel should be totally involved in the spiritual side of the world. כשערך החיים בחומיותם ורוחניותם יורדים עד שפלת הדיוטה התחתונה, when it goes down to the lowest level possible of materialism, ימלא מחובים הפסק נשימה. Rav Kook says this will cause disease, pain. The neshima, that our breathing will stop. פרעות בדפיקת הלב, our heartbeat will have problems. ופרפור איברים, and there'll be convulsions of our limbs. Yisrael, nimshalim la'of. Israel is compared to a bird. Vu notzar la'uf. Rav Kook said Israel was created to fly. Vu muchach la'uf, and he must fly. Because if a bird doesn't fly, it's going to collapse and it's going to crash. Its heart and soul has to praise Hashem, living God. How could Israel fly if its feet are in the mud? And its life is surrounded by null and voidness as compared to its nobility. So Rav Kook is talking about the fall of spirituality in the world and how detrimental it's going to be not only to the world but to the people of Israel, who's a nation that's supposed to fly spiritually, to lift up the world, to be a light to the nations. And Rav Kook talks about the solution to the problem. But before we get to the solution, these words of Rav Kook are very powerful, because when we open the verses of this week's portion, Kidoshim to you, be holy because I am holy. God is commanding the people of Israel. It is not only being good in the world and being a proper person in the world and living a life of morality and spirituality, and that the whole world, everyone is equal, has to live a proper life, a life of goodness in the world. Every person in the world, whether he comes from this place or that place, we're all in one. God created all of us in the image of God to be good people in the world. But God is telling Israel of another purpose of being holy. Holy is much more than just being good. Just doing, again, being a good person in the world. There is more that God is asking of Israel when God is saying to us, be holy. Not everyone is commanded to be holy. That's something that's a very, very high level of what being holiness is all about. And in order to explain this a little more, I'd like to mention a Gemara, a Talmudic passage in the Agadot of the Churban, in the stories of destruction mentioned in Gittin, the tractate Gittin 56. As we all know, the tractate of Gittin talks about divorce, and that's why it's suitable to put the stories of destruction there, because when God punished Israel by expelling us from our land and divorcing us, so-called, right? It was a divorce where he takes us back later, but it's like a divorce, right? For a temporary divorce. So in that same tractate, the stories of destruction of the temple are brought down. And God, is a very, very powerful story where God remains silent and watches over a terrible atrocity. And I'd like to quickly mention it. Titus, as we know, the Roman general, he enters the Holy of Holies. The Talmud tells us he opens the Torah scroll and he lays it down on the ground as a bed, and he has relations with a harlot in the Holy of the Holiest place you can possibly fathom. And after he does his thing in the Holy of Holies, he takes a sword and he stabs the curtain, the parashat, which separates the sanctuary from the Holy of Holies, and blood starts to come out of the parashat, of the curtain, and he thinks he's killed God. Right? Talmud says he thinks he killed himself in a nice language, because we don't mention killing God, right? But of course, his own understanding of God is a idol worship understanding and thinking that God is flesh. And he goes on to take the parochet, the curtain, and he takes the vessels of the temple and he puts them inside the curtain. He brings it back to Rome, glorifying his victory over Israel. And later on, Talmud talks about how he's punished with a parasite entering his brain and slowly knocking away until he dies eventually. But the Maharal of Prague, he has a very, very profound question. Why did God remain silent? We just read last week's portion, Nadav Avihu, the sons of Aaron, offer a strange fire in the temple. And right away they're punished on the spot. And here, this evil King Titus does this act of such disgrace, of such perversion in the holiest place on earth, and gets away with it, right? Supposedly, he takes the vessels and all that, seems to get away with it. So why does God relate to these Nadav Avihu, the sons of Aaron, in a much different way, on the spot punishing them? And the Maharal right away answers, and he says that there's a big difference between these evil Titus, this evil nation, person of the nations, and the people of Israel, is that God, when he's looking at Israel, he judges them bechuta se'ara, with just like a little hair, a little string of hair, very, very carefully judging Israel. Because of their high, of course, the high level, God is much stricter in judgment when it comes to the people of Israel. So that was the response that Maharal of Prague gives. But if we look a little further in another source written by Rav Chaim Volozhin of the Nefesh HaChaim, and I'd like to quote a little bit of what he says. He talks about a person that shouldn't come along and say, who am I? What kind of power do I have in this world? But you should know how much influence you have as a human being in changing the upper worlds. And he talks about the power of Israel. How when Titus came along and destroyed the temple, he says he brings down the famous Talmudic quote that it was something already that was grinded already. It was already a destroyed temple. Because the real destruction of the temple was the destruction of the upper temple. When Israel was behaving improperly, their actions were so powerful that they transcend way beyond this world, and they affect the upper worlds. And in the upper worlds, the temple in the upper worlds was destroyed already. So all it took was a Titus, who was a puppet in God's hands, and a Nebuchadnezzar in the first temple, the Babylonian destruction of the first temple, and here Titus, the Romans, the second destruction. They were sort of just bringing into fruition what the destruction that already took place because of the actions of the people of Israel that affected the upper worlds. And therefore God's remaining silent, as we connect to what we were saying beforehand, is just that, of course, that God is not going to react to these low lives of people in the world. They're just vessels in God's hand. And therefore there's no real reaction of Hashem on their side. Of course they'll get their punishment eventually, they'll be wiped out and they'll be punished in the future world. But in reality, God's not going to remain silent when a nation of Israel, the holy people that are supposed to be behaving properly, are doing the wrong thing. Because their actions are so powerful that they are reaching the highest level of spiritual worlds and how they affect the entire physical world as well through those actions. And here God is not willing to remain silent because their actions are so influential, what they can do for the world, to make it or break the world. And this understanding of what the Talmud and what Rav Chaim Volozhin is saying basically connects to what we do. We opened up our Torah with. Kidoshim to you must be holy. God is saying to Israel, you must be holy because I am holy. Your actions are so powerful. Your ability to influence the upper worlds. As it says, God created man in his image, right? The ability to emulate God and to literally create upper worlds. We have the ability to create the upper worlds. And if we are not behaving the way we should behave with holiness, we are actually causing destruction and destroying the world that God created. Literally destroying the world that God created. So the spiritual downfall that Rav Kook causes, Rav Kook spoke about, that causes the whole world to go to darkness. And that Israel, he says, is literally thousands of times more the way it affects the nation of Israel, has everything to do with that, what we just said, Kidoshim to you, be holy, because I am holy. God has given Israel a very, very important purpose in the world. And when this task is not fulfilled properly, right away we're going to see the results. And that's the difference of us and the nations. The nations, God remains silent over evilness. And here the Holocaust, I think, and I'm not here to try to understand, no one can understand and explain the Holocaust. But we can say is where when God remains silent in a way. We say, why did God immediately stop the Nazis? Well, first of all, we know the world works through nature. Right, God, where was man, not where was God? That's one famous answer. But if we look at the story of Titus here, this is a small taste of what the Nazis did, defiling and the disgracing of Israel and the Holy of Holies. And the Holocaust itself, that whole period of darkness that we saw in Europe, which we can't explain really, right? We can only just say, it reminds us, it's like this concept of Titus and God remaining silent of the Holy of Holies, when the Holy of Holies was defiled, of course, at a much larger scale when 6 million Jews were murdered and slaughtered. We can't fathom such a number. But the fact that Israel received such a severe blow, again, is just like Nadav Avihu, the story of Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aaron, offering a fire, a strange fire, and were burned. I think, again, we have to explain and try to, we can't fathom, but we at least to touch upon that there's something, when Israel goes through such suffering in the world, and we've seen our suffering in the Inquisitions and throughout Europe and the highest level, the Holocaust. That is not a chance thing. We just can't say the world just is governed by chance. There's something that is so powerful by the nation of Israel that we are either reaching the highest level levels of spirituality and prosperous, becoming prosperous and successful, or God forbid we go down so strongly that literally we can't fathom the tragedy of 6 million people being murdered. That's something that's so beyond our ability to grasp as human beings. So here again, we are seeing the two sides that Rav Kook is talking about, that Rav Chaim of Volozhin is talking about, how powerful Israel is affecting the upper worlds. And what we saw again when we were discussing the sons of Aaron being burned. So God, again, we can't understand this, but this is the way it works. This is the way it works. We know that this was not a chance event, obviously. And nothing is chance in this world. I mean, God wants human beings to react and to stop madness. But when Israel, again, enters the picture, everything about our nation is totally, breaks all the laws of logic and nature. When we are reaching our highest points of level of blessing and abundance, Israel reaches the highest levels in all ways, or goes down to the lowest level. This is really the way it works. And the verse says, Kidoshim to you shall be holy. God is saying, because I am holy. Remember that you have to be holy. And we're not holy enough, and only God knows if we're being holy or not, because we can't judge as human beings, right? We're limited in our judgment. But Hashem judges and knows us, who we are. And when we're being holy, and we're doing our function of being holy, God promises us, again, our blessing, where we will thrive in our land. And this, I think, we see after that terrible tragedy of the Holocaust, the formation of the state of Israel. Redemption after that terrible, terrible, terrible time, the darkest of all times. Hashem doesn't give up on his people of Israel, and has given us a blessing of returning to the land of Israel and coming back and rebuilding our nation. And God is, of course, we have to remember those words. In order for us to thrive in the land of Israel, to be successful in the land of Israel, Kidoshim to you, we must be holy, because I am holy. If Israel will to build a nation through holiness, which is living a life of light, letting our light shine to the nations of the world, following the Torah the way we're supposed to be, living a morally correct life in every possible way, and being holy. Holy is rising above the regular level, as we said before. Being holy is devotion. That's a lesson in itself. And the details of what it is to be holy, the Ramchal describes it in Mesilat Yesharim. And of course, we all, certain examples, we can think of ourselves what it is to be holy. But holy, more than anything, means living up to our potential of being the people of Israel. And the fact that when we are holy, we are naturally cleansing the Holy of Holies, the temple, because we are literally walking temples. And that's what the Rav Chaim Volozhin continues to say, is that every person himself is like a walking temple. And if we are defiling our sanctuary, our human sanctuary, then we're defiling the God's sanctuary. So being holy and living a holy life is what we are destined to be. Rav Kook says, Kidoshim to you, be holy, because I am holy. God is saying, is also not only a commandment, but it's also a promise. You will be holy, and you will reach your potential. God willing, we will work on ourselves and grow spiritually, and as we are walking towards the receiving of the Torah again, we know in the period of the Omer, it all fits in perfectly. Every day is another ascent, every day is another climb towards this holiness that we are commanded to be as a destiny, and building our nation through holiness and spirituality. Shabbat Shalom, B'Sahot Tovot, Yeshua Benechamot.